Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Signal Hour. It is so good to be back with you. Welcome, everybody. Welcome from all over the place. Germany, Oklahoma, Northern Michigan. It looks like Miami. So welcome, everybody. And Evie, so good to be back here with you today.
Hi, good afternoon. So glad to be here with everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
Now, remember, Signal Hour is where we find the signal within the signal. Today, we're going to be discussing three big topics, and in no particular order, they are these. Well, actually, it's in this particular order. We have to talk about vaccine deaths revealed now. New studies have just come out. We're going to take a look at those. Very solid studies. It raises a lot of questions, obviously. We have to talk about this so-called 764 threats to our children, particularly young females, that's been surfaced. You see the FBI talking about it now, the Department of Justice. They've just swept up a couple of hundred arrests, but this is pretty dark. And then we're going to talk about Canada has a growing communism problem. It has had one for a while, but we're going to go there.
It's getting worse.
it's getting worse.
Oh.
So as a reminder for everybody, Peak Prosperity members, this carries on 1 hour out here in public with everybody, 1 hour-ish back at Peak Prosperity. If you're watching it at Peak Prosperity, get that link right there. It's a continuous thing. You won't even notice. We just switch over and you just keep watching. And for everybody who's wondering, we're going to be talking about this, though, after we hear about the 764 stuff. Why isn't the FBI actually arresting high-level targets? Got a point of view on that. Got some data on that. The United States has a absolutely obvious national security problem that's barely bubbling under the surface. We're going to have to talk about that. And I'm not saying we have a World War III on our hands, but the world is certainly at war. We got to talk about that. Huge implications for that. So, Evie, we're going to start here today.
Great.
And
deaths.
Yeah, why do you think I put the quotes around that word?
Are they
vaccine?
trying to redefine things?
Well, because it's not a vaccine.
Oh, well, yeah, that's true too.
A vaccine. Let's talk about
You're right.
some things vaccines do. They protect you from a disease, right?
Right.
The COVID jabs didn't stop you from catching it or transmitting it, right?
So what did they do?
And they are supposed to give you a better all-cause outcome,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And we've now found out a lot of very dark things, which I think fits into the larger sweep. We look at these dark things. We say, wow, what are they doing to our children? Where did the insects go? Wait, how did they get the vaccine so wrong? If you stop thinking that these were accidents and, oh my gosh, we just flipped the coin and it came up snake eyes, to mix metaphors, right? The pattern emerges. It's an obvious pattern at this point. You and I struggle to communicate it.
Well, it's hard. I mean, you don't want to think that it's there. And so I think there's a part, at least for me, there's a part that really wants to believe that the world is a good place and that people, on large part mean well for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think this data is definitely not communicating that.
Right.
Which is, it's hard. It's hard to digest that emotionally. Yeah. So.
Well, as you know, I spent a lot of time going over things about vaccines and things like that. And the whole time I was doing that, YouTube was busy censoring me, putting up helpful, this conflicts with what the CDC says. And it was all this appeal to authority. And it was all, there's a centralized correct view. There's a one true and approved truth about these things. And no questioning was allowed, even though a very novel platform. And this is one of the side effects of these novel platform. We now found out April 1st that we have the proof, peer-reviewed and published. I've been talking about this for a while with Kevin McKiernan and other people who found it. But scientists are shocked. World's first peer-reviewed paper, made it all the way through the process, Pfizer mRNA vaccine, contaminated not just with DNA, which is very bad all by itself, but with SV40, which is the simian virus 40. It's a promoter region. It's associated with cancer. To have your mRNA gene product, experimental therapy, your experimental gene therapy, be contaminated, not just with DNA, but DNA and the SV40 component of DNA.
SV40.
Very bad.
And the SV40, as we know, is known to be cancerous or cause cancer. Is that right? Yeah.
Now, this isn't the entire SV40. It's the SV40 promoter and effector regions, but those are actually kind of it's like saying the trigger on a gun. It's
still a gun.
It's not good. Anyway, obviously you wouldn't want this to happen. You would want to have complete studies before you would go live with something like this. But
right.
Of course, It went completely live. Somebody says the video has stopped for me. Is anybody else having that problem? If anybody else has that problem, let us know.
Yep.
Looks
Hopefully
to be
it's not glitchy.
working well on our end. And
oh, this one, the lack of pollinators, Ben Keegan.
Oh, yeah.
Right there.
Just a second, but
Sure,
Homo
sure.
sapiens, the next kind, said it's also COVID that makes people primarily, I'm going to guess that means sick, not the vaccine. I'll disagree. I agree that COVID can make people primarily sick, but the worst that we're seeing clinically from all the doctors I talk to are people who've been vaccinated, multiply vaccinated, particularly if they've gone past the triple vaccination stage, right? So they've had a booster.
Mm-hmm.
That means their IgG4 levels start to come up and they no longer can fight the disease correctly.
Right.
Because IgG4 is your body's way of saying, oh, dial it back. We're seeing this antigen so often, like pollen.
Just don't worry about it.
Let's not fight this.
Yeah.
And that's okay when it's pollen, but when you're facing a replicating pathogen, it's not good. So in fact, this isn't actually an accurate statement as far as I understand. So
sure.
What else did you have?
The one I saw, it was up there close to the lack of pollinators, Ben Keegan, right there.
Yes.
The lack of pollinators is disturbing. What should be a field buzzing insects is quite literally two, a bumblebee and honeybee, no small wasps or flies. Yes.
We're finding the same thing here.
I was actually hand pollinating, which breaks my heart, actually.
With a paintbrush.
With a paintbrush,
yeah.
Our plum trees, because I found the same thing to be true.
It's bad this year.
It's really bad.
It's really bad.
We didn't have the bumblebee population and the smaller bees. I don't know all the different varieties, but we were missing a whole bunch of them. And turns out my daughter was saying that honeybees, when you bring them in, it actually displaces the population of all the native bees. And then and they're very territorial with their pollen and the flowers that they like to utilize. And so it ends up that your local bees die off. And then eventually when the honeybees die off too, nobody's left.
Okay.
Anyway.
There's a whole side subject.
It was a squirrel.
It was a squirrel moment.
So I'm very sad about the bees, and I don't know what the problems are. But
I know. Separate issue. But we're going to get back on the vaccine injury and unfortunately death chain. This came out, it's a preprint, so it hasn't made it all the way through peer review. Two important names, both in yellow. Start with the last one first, Joseph Latipo. That is the Surgeon General for the state of Florida, right? Okay. And cool. And then Recep Levy is an MIT very highly regarded statistical researcher. So this is what they came up with. 12-month. They always have these banal, bland titles. 12-month all-cause mortality, all cause, so not just COVID. 12-month dying from anything, everything mortality after initial COVID-19 vaccination. And they're just comparing Pfizer to Moderna. They didn't compare either of those to placebo or unvaccinated, which would be the placebo in this case. So they're just comparing these two head to head.
To see which works better.
Not which works better, unfortunately. Quite the opposite. Now, Nicholas Holscher does a great job wrapping all this up for everybody at Focal Points, Courageous Discourse over on Substack. All right. It's focalpoints.com.
So new study, Pfizer recipients face 37% higher risk of death than Moderna recipients.
So big study.
Study of 1.47 million Florida adults by MIT's Recep Levi and Surgeon General Joseph Latipo finds significantly higher all-cause cardiovascular and COVID-19 mortality after Pfizer vaccination.
Interesting. Now, this is interesting because Pfizer had 30 micrograms of mRNA per shot and Moderna had 100. So if it was the mRNA component,
right?
They both had these lipid nanoparticles, the LNPs,
right?
Kind of same, secret formulations, but more or less identical. The big difference to me is that Pfizer came contaminated with a hefty amount of DNA and SV40. Okay.
Right. But Moderna had more
mRNA.
Of the mRNA on balance.
So this is important. A huge study, 1.47 million people, non-institutionalized. So they're not in prisons. They're not in old folks' homes. These are just people wandering around in the wild. And they had 735,050 Pfizer recipients, and they perfectly matched them up against 735,050 Moderna recipients. So this is important because what they did here that hasn't been done, or they did this better than any study I've seen so far, is they were able to match people by age, by sex, by timing, by location. So when you do those cohort matchings, it allows you to make direct comparisons, right? So this is amazing. And they only did it through 2 doses. So that was it. You either had 2 doses of Moderna or 2 doses of Pfizer, and that's it. And then they lined all those people up and took a look what happened next. And then they just went for 12 months after the second dose. So people who got 3, 4 doses excluded. So we don't know.
Okay.
Anybody who was unvaccinated, not in the study. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But what ought to happen if these things are at all, like if they're safe and effective, there should be 0 difference in mortality between the 2 groups.
Right.
0.
That makes sense.
And the outcomes that they were looking for were all-cause mortality, cardiovascular mortality, COVID-19 mortality, so you can tease that out, and then non-COVID mortality. And here's what here, let's just go with it. This is just jumping straight to the conclusions.
Wow. Okay. The findings. Pfizer vaccinated adults face a higher risk of all-cause mortality, 37% more or higher.
Yeah. So just to put that in context, let's imagine for a moment that out of 100,000 people, I'm just going to make numbers up so it's super easy to do in my head.
Yeah.
If we said, oh, out of, I'll do it, 10,000 people, they do it out of 100,000, 10,000. Out of 10,000 people, 100 people died over that period of time after getting Moderna. 137 people would have died.
I see.
After getting Pfizer.
Okay.
Now, what we don't know in that, because they didn't tell us, was, well, what would the baseline have been?
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Right.
We don't know. Like,
There's
out of
no
those
placebo
10,000, what would have been the normal, ordinary expected
amount
rate of death?
Yeah.
But they weren't going there because that's a big, tricky sort of an area to go after. They just wanted to say, comparing these 2 things, you can clearly see a 37% difference is staggeringly high.
Wow.
And it tells us there's something really different. Like if I just said, Evie, right now you have to choose gun to your head, which one you taking? Like, I'll take the Moderna.
Yes.
I like my 37% better chance of not dying.
Or the cardiovascular mortality, which is meaning that you have
if you
heart
died.
cells, or it's if you die of a heart issue related to the vaccine, it's a 53% higher chance of that happening. Or did I say that incorrectly?
Pfizer had 53% more cardiovascular issue.
Yes.
Mortality. This is just mortality. So these are what are called binary or discrete endpoints. You either die or you don't. This isn't also parsing through there and saying, well, how many more people had heart disease that they're still living with?
Right.
We won't know that because this is Florida public health records, which aren't the same thing as clinical records. So they're not going in. You can't click through and find out each one of these cases, how they're faring from a clinical standpoint.
I see.
It's very discrete because Florida at the highest level has 2 pieces of information. Did you get the vaccine and when? Did you die?
Okay.
So that's all they get to work with here.
Way out.
Yeah.
Yep. And then people that died of COVID-19 were 88%, had an 88% greater chance of that.
So Pfizer did not work as well against COVID as Moderna.
That's interesting. Non-COVID-19 mortality. So I guess didn't die of COVID.
Yep.
Of or with.
Yeah.
Greater 35% greater mortality if you took the Pfizer.
This is startling. This is the kind of information we probably should have had in 2021 within a couple of months of introduction. And I bet we did. Did
they push one more than the other?
Oh, they pushed Pfizer really hard.
So.
Real hard.
That's what I remember.
They wanted everybody to get Pfizer. And again, coin flip time. If you're going to do this, and it always comes up snake eyes, to mix my metaphors, like every single time when they recommended something really strongly, that was the worst thing for public health outcome and individual health outcomes.
Wow.
Unerringly, they didn't get one thing right that I'm aware of.
No.
Not remdesivir, not ventilators, not ivermectin, not hydroxychloroquine, not vitamin D, not being outside in the sun with fresh air, not hanging out with your friends and buddies, not being totally stressed, not giving these jabs to people who had 0 risk from COVID. That would be everybody under the age of 60 who's healthy, especially children, which, by the way, they still give these vaccines. That one in particular, Pfizer, right at the top of the list for jabbing into infants' arms 6 months and older. Millions of
legs, actually. They do it in their legs because their arms aren't big enough. You know what? That's just gross. And remember all those TV commercials too? It's like brought to you by Pfizer. Like,
well, and let me just so this is the data from this thing, and here,
this is what it looks like.
Maybe you can see my pointer here.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Pfizer's, the so-called BNT 162b2, and then you have mRNA 1273, which is the Moderna, and you can see time of days from time of the second dose. This is the cumulative risk, all-cause deaths. You can just see more people are dying, and it's a smooth separating curve. If you just went on longer and longer, they would get wider and wider, right?
Yep.
Same thing for COVID-19 deaths, non-COVID deaths, cardiovascular deaths, same story over and over again. But from a public health standpoint, you could have detected this within 100 days. Easy.
Oh, yeah.
In a very, very statistically relevant manner.
You're
the
right.
CDC did not do this. The FDA did not do this. At a minimum, they should have done this. And then people, you give me this and they say, listen, we're going to force you, we're going to mandate that you have to take this jab. Which one you want? I'm like, dude, I want the one with the lower death if I have to.
Exactly. Why didn't they do it, though?
Consent.
Like,
you
have a slide about that, don't you?
I don't know, but here's now we can start to understand what the relative risk here was.
Okay. So how bad would these have been compared to placebo?
We don't know.
Question.
Again, we still don't know.
We don't know. But regarding all-cause mortality, Pfizer recipients had a significantly higher 12-month all-cause death rate than Moderna recipients, about 37% higher risk. Pfizer risk was 847.2 deaths per 100,000 people versus Moderna risk, which was 617.9 deaths per 100,000 people.
Okay, so stop right there for a second, and let's just mentally divide those two numbers in my head. 130 difference. So that's 230.
Yeah.
So 230 more people died for every 100,000 people. And of course, millions and millions and millions and millions are being jabbed. So that's a lot of deaths. Every one of those, a husband, a father, a mother, a wife, a child, every one of those a real human being.
Right.
With it's just this is a mass, the worst, most lethal medical intervention in all of human history.
It is.
And this is what they prevented us from talking about and why we got censored and banned.
That's right. Which is disgusting. But can I just add something to this? This is talking about death, which in some cases is the better thing that could happen to you in this instance, because if you have severe immune issues as a result, do you remember those people that had those terrible tremors they couldn't control and horrible pain throughout their entire bodies? There are things worse than death, and this isn't talking about any of those other side effects, correct?
No.
This is just taking into account
no
your heart
continuous
stops,
outcomes.
you're all done.
But what you're saying is right. The damage from this is well beyond what we're even seeing here.
Yes.
Because for everybody who dies, I'm going to make a number up in my head, 10 more or 100 more, some other number, are just living with the consequences that aren't quite lethal, but bad in a scale, in a spectrum.
Oh, that ruin their lives in some cases.
And I just want to point out down here the power of this study. So the odds ratio, this is 95% confidence intervals. We're 95% sure that the range of this odds ratio is around 37, 38%. 37% is the risk ratio. Odds ratio is 38%. But look at the confidence interval, 1.331 to 1.439. It does not go below 1, which would say we're not certain. Doesn't even get close to 1. This shows you just how powered this study was. That's a very tight range. We are 95% sure that that these charts are real. These is a very high-powered study.
Wow.
Now, chirping crickets from the media about this.
Oh.
The same people.
Everybody rushed to cover it, did they?
Chirping crickets.
Oh.
Right.
So you wouldn't have heard this in mainstream news. You wouldn't have heard it anywhere or read it anywhere unless you were looking for it?
No, but on Twitter sphere, we have all of our terrible, pharma shills, doctors who this study is not, didn't consider it. They're just trying to, but they're starting to sound real panicky and desperate.
Yeah.
The walls are closing in on their vaunted vax narrative. And in particular, so imagine this compared to placebo, and the biggest, most outrageous war garble. That's what we do when
turkey call.
It's the turkey call. When you hear that warbling sound, it means that you're just in garbled territory. So all these people out there are terrified because Bobby Kennedy came out and announced, we're going to go back and we're going to test every vaccine against placebo. And you would have thought he just said, I'm going to steer an asteroid into the earth, right? There's You can't
I'm going to cut
that.
off the leg of every child, like something horrific.
Something horrific. And it's just like the most obvious thing. And the first question is, wait a minute, they're not? The answer is no. None of these vaccines have been tested against placebo.
Which that in itself really needed to be written about and opined on.
Don't you think?
I'm shocked that the journalist didn't pick that up. And rather, they took the story of trying to slam him and slander him, you know, because he was bringing the truth forward.
All right, so these monsters need to have names, and one of those names is Dr. Peter Marks. This is a really good little clip here from ICANN, that's Del Bigtree, but we're going to listen in now on it's a recording done in 2021. It's but listen carefully. Dr. Marks is like a Brady Bunch collection of people at a Zoom meeting during COVID. So, of course, they're all Zoom meetings, and Dr. Marks is in the center talking. Listen carefully to what he's saying. It's really monstrous. I mean, really bad.
Discussing just, concerns for athletes and things like this. I think there's important things to see here.
Now, what parents really care about is what's the worst thing can happen. And we do know that for males under the age of about 30, there is an increased incidence, it appears, with the vaccines of a rare side effect of an mild inflammation of the heart called myocarditis.
Okay. We're just going to have to start. Let me start unpacking this for everybody. Rare is not a scientific term. It's not how we operate. 1 in 38,412 is a term, scientific term, right? So rare is not a term. Second, there is no such thing as mild myocarditis. They tried desperately to rebrand this at the time. Now we understand, looking back, because we have all the gadolinium and the imaging studies, that what they called mild myocarditis came with microscarring, which is anything but mild, because if you have enough microscarring in a heart, it can lead to fibrillations and seizures and cardiac death and all of that. This is September of 2021. So they have now 9 months of surveillance data on this, because really it was January of 21 when the vaccine first came out. 9 months, plenty of time to have seen and collected this gathering storm of stuff. But listen to him trying to spin it here for all the other doctors on this vaunted vaccine committee. That's what evil looks like. This is it right here. It's all these people getting together, checking their brains at the door, and just doing what they think they need to do to stay relevant and in power. So again, but listen to the spin. It's rare. It's mild. There's no such thing as, that's like saying mild brain death. I have a mild case of pregnancy. It's like, it's not a thing. It's not a
medical term.
It's not a thing. Okay.
That's happening in a small number of people, somewhere on the order of, in males, about 1 in 5,000.
That's a term.
And it's very mild. Only about 2% have required of that number have actually required any significant medical intervention. Most are just, they go to the hospital, they're looked at, observed, given a little bit of ibuprofen, a pain reliever, and they go home, and they seem to be doing just fine in follow-up, as in the studies that we've been looking at. So that's probably the worst I have to say about this. For these mRNA vaccines, there is incredible BS out there about like thousands of people dying, etc. That just ain't true.
Yeah, it is. That's what the VAERS data showed anyway. Lots and lots of people dying from this. But again, he's just throwing all these assertions out. Remember all the things that they tried to paint our side with? You're anti-science, and then they throw out anti-science stuff like rare, mild. They have all these studies that show they didn't do any comprehensive follow-up studies on these people, and I can show you thousands and thousands of cases of young people whose hearts were permanently damaged. Remember Kyle Warner, the professional bike racer, the people have POTS, which even if it resolved a few years later, was a couple of years out of their life. These were serious things. Here he is minimizing. Oh, it's mild. It's mild. Most go home and they're fine. The studies we've done, which they didn't do, right? They were designed not to find the things that they didn't want to find. I mean, this is just the grossest.
I just have to say, though,
these people are monsters.
Well,
monsters.
They are monsters. And it's gross is that all these individuals look like they have something way better to do than to listen to this conversation anyway. Like nobody's going to ask any critical questions here. Do you see it?
I don't.
And
they're like out to lunch.
From all of the COVID-19 vaccines, our folks really care about this. And it's very hard to find cases of deaths that are directly related to these vaccines. There are perhaps a handful, but in general, the number of lives that are being saved is far, far, far greater.
So listen, so get this. He says, well, perhaps there's a handful. He's talking, okay, we killed some people, but we saved far, far more people. This is the greater good argument, but it falls apart immediately upon inspection because it wasn't people dying of COVID. It was over the age of 70, morbidly obese with other comorbidities.
Right.
And it went up exponentially from there with age. So more 90-year-olds than 80-year-olds, more 80-year-olds than 70-year-olds. But once you got to 60 and you were healthy, nobody died from this.
It's true.
Nobody.
But rather you'd harm all these children.
Why? But he's talking about, oh, we're injecting this into children. Some of them die, but tragic as that is, think how many we're saving. It's like, no. None of them were dying from COVID. You're not saving any. 0 is the save number, but you are killing them and injuring the ones who didn't outright die for life. There's no such thing as mild myocarditis. Once your heart scars, it's scarred for life.
Yeah, those are cells that don't regenerate.
They do not. Nature in her infinite wisdom said, yeah, don't remake heart cells.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's several things to point out there. The fact that he says there may be a handful of people that have died, that they're difficult to find. We're having difficulty finding the deaths, but there may be several, or a handful. I think we pass this off far too lightly. If the United States government is making a product and ensuring that it's safe, and if they go as far as mandated upon the public, which is what President Biden did, that means this statement that a handful of people have died means a handful of people were murdered by the United States government. And at the moment you are making a decision, a greater good decision to say that we are happy murdering perfectly innocent people to achieve some outcome, this is why we need transparency in science. This is why we're demanding a petition be signed that all of the documents involved in vaccines, everything that comes through VAERS, that all of the information be presented to the public. If our government is going to make a decision to kill us, and I want to give this some perspective. We watch these cases of a death row inmate, how hard they fight. It's top news. Will they be killed? Will they not? Even after they murdered several people, whether it's just or not. What Peter Marks just said is it's okay to murder perhaps an innocent child, a mother of a family, a military person, because that's just the way, And so when he says, we don't know where to find them, I don't think it's very hard. The VAERS system, which is our major capture system, currently has 38,541 reported deaths from just the COVID vaccines. They're there. They're not hard to find. They're there. And so
38,541. Maybe not all of them belong to the shot, but let's imagine have to. So the government just said, and it's a great point. He's like, when it comes to like a death row inmate, fights and appeals and this is and that's, we make movies about, is the governor going to call at the last minute, this one every life, what if we get it wrong? We have to wrestle with it. But when it comes to public health, they just shrug and they go, oh, well, 17,000 people. What are you going to do?
Cost of doing business.
It's like Tony Soprano. What are you going to do? It's monsters, these people. This is who we're up against. This darkness, these people are not humans the way I understand humans. No compassion, no conscience, right?
Yep.
And for what? I don't know, for a couple bucks because, I have an important job. Like every single person on that panel ought to have been going, whoa, time out. Tell me again what the risk is of COVID to these children. And the answer would be 0. But then he would have flipped to the next thing. He would have said, well, but we wouldn't want grandma. You wouldn't want to feel bad if grandma got COVID. And then you would say, do these medical gene product things, do they stop transmission?
Right.
Well, no,
do
they don't.
Work or not?
No, they don't stop transmission. They wear off quickly. You have to get multiple boosters. Officially, I think you're up to 12 or 15 now. I forget what the number is, but it's over 10.
Is that right?
Yeah. If you're up to date.
Double digits?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Because it just keeps wearing off. And every time you get it, your risk of having some bad outcome just skyrockets.
Yeah.
So.
And I've heard people say that the more they get, the worse they feel.
But this is simple logic. You simply do not give a medical intervention to somebody who does not have a risk from that thing. That is not a vaccine.
No.
It's not. So
it's not preventative treatment either.
It's not. So here's an analogy. That'd be like saying, hey, the FDA and the CDC have determined that eventually some percentage of us are going to need heart bypasses. So therefore, everybody gets a heart bypass preventatively today. Like, wait, no, I don't have occluded arteries right now. And there's a huge risk from going in for heart bypass surgery. Some percentage of those people are going to be, that literally that is the entire logic of this COVID thing. That's how absurd it is. That's why we struggle for words around this. Because it's just ridiculous.
Oh, that's interesting. Rocket Boy TY, Dr. Peter Marks. No. Up here is it
this
the
one.
same one?
Yeah.
Dr. Peter Marks, the same Peter Marks that ignored his team on gene therapies.
Yes, that one.
Top FDA official Peter Marks overruled staff review team to approve Sarepta gene therapy for a third time.
Yep, that one.
Okay.
He is a monster. He is a
Not a good
truly
human.
terrible human being. And
Guessing.
unfortunately, we're shot through with terrible human beings at this point in
I
time.
think that's true.
And just to round it out, I mean, look, something happened in the last 30 years. It's not like we're up like 10% or 15%. Look at these things. ADHD up 819%, right? Fibromyalgia up 7,272%. How about bipolar disorder in youth up 10,833%?
That's just awful.
All these things.
Some of
Immune
these are worse
disorders,
than death.
1,600%. And worse than death. You're right. No, some of these are terrible, awful things. And this is actually why they're freaking out, why they don't want us to look at vaccines versus placebo, because some of these things on this list are going to pop out as caused by, maybe if not the vaccine antigen itself, the adjuvants they use like aluminum, the mercury that's still in some of them, or some combination of getting walloped with too many of these things at a critical moment of your developing immune system's genesis.
Oh, it's awful.
But a non-evil, non-satanic culture would look at this and go, we better figure this out. There's not only been no interest in this, you get banned, you get censored, you get shouted down, you will lose your job in certain institutions for even daring to notice this chart and ask a question about it.
You know what I find particularly gross about it too? Is that a lot of the individuals that are in positions of power, I would consider them to be like elders. Like they've held those jobs for a long time. They have a lot of experience. They've been around the block. And I wouldn't imagine that like if we had village elders, that they would be the ones, if they really truly cared about their tribe, mandating people take these things that harm and maim and just destroy people's lives. Like they're not. I'm really disappointed. I'm disappointed.
Disappointed. You sound Canadian.
All right, I'm sorry.
I
can't
annoyed.
say the words I really want to say
I
online
know.
because they're I don't want to offend people's sensibilities, but
yeah, and please hold on, this one. Sorry, this one. Hey, Major Hydraulics says, I was vaccinated 2 times for COVID. I feel so dumb. You should feel misled. You should feel betrayed. Don't feel dumb. I mean, the heavy full court pressure, like we should be able to trust the people who come in a position of authority, right? I want to trust that when the fire department pulls up because my house is on fire, that what comes out of the hose is water, not gasoline, right? And so that's how I see this. We were betrayed comprehensively, and I think there needs to be extraordinary consequences and punishments for this. I mean, the worst you can imagine.
I agree.
Yep.
Just like the Nuremberg trials, we got to do something like that.
Yep.
It's warranted, I think, in this.
And by the way, you see all this stuff on here that came up. And now we finally have this too.
All right. The experimental gene therapies cross the placental barrier. Oh, great.
Taiwanese scientists.
Kaboom.
Yeah.
New preprint research, what is that?
Research Pub is a preprint server.
Okay. Published in February of 17th, 2025 by Taiwanese scientists demonstrate synthetic spike protein and polyethylene glycol, or PEG, from mRNA 1273 or Moderna, given to pregnant mice at doses similar to humans, crosses placenta and distributes to fetus. Warn about risks of long-term genotoxicity on babies born from vaccinated mothers, such as genome integration, oncogenesis, or germline transmission.
Boy, so they're saying not only does this stuff cross the barrier, but they have evidence, they have data that the contaminants, the DNA contaminants, or possibly even that the mRNA itself was back translated, reverse transcriptase. It's back translated into DNA and then put into germline transmission, means it got put into the actual germlines, either in males' spermatozoa and females' eggs.
The genetics of
like it's in there.
Our human babies.
Yes.
Are forever changed.
Which by the way is evil, and it's warned about extensively in religious texts. Do not do that. Do not rewrite your
code.
your godlike image, your code. Don't do that.
Yep.
God's got it covered.
Just don't.
No, this is evil. That we have to keep talking about that, because
there's more here.
it truly is.
It goes on to say spike mRNA entered maternal circulation and crossed the placenta to fetal blood within 1 hour, and placental spike mRNA, placental mRNA mainly accumulated in fetal livers, dwelt in fetal placentas, and trunk soft tissues. So it looks like once this gets in, it goes everywhere. And that's really quickly as well.
It does.
Within an hour.
It does. So I just want to keep talking about the evil of all of this. So we know this, right? We know this. And so the first thing you do is you pull them from the market instantly.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you do.
All done.
All done
no
in one.
More.
I want to but we've known, so this is from a Miller study, and Miller et al. Back in 2011 is when it came out. And it's looking at a couple of things here. Total number of infant deaths. This is across 30 nations. So this is big, giant epidemiological study. 30 nations. Norway, the UK, France, Germany, the US, Canada, right? 30 nations.
Mm-hmm.
And it asks, okay, what's your infant mortality rate? And every country you come over has an infant mortality rate. But the second thing they regressed that against was said, well, how many vaccine doses do you give to infants? And it goes up this way. Now, if vaccines caused infants to live longer or not die as much, the line would slope this way, from left to right, downwards. It slopes upwards, from left to right, upwards. The line, it slopes the wrong way.
Yeah, it does. The more shots you get, the more issues, the more death.
The more infant death you get. We call it SIDS, but more infant death, right? SIDS is one form of a way an infant can die, sudden infant death syndrome.
That's a
look at the p-value
chart.
0.000. The chance of this being due to random chance, just randomly we just give vaccines. They're actually good for us, but randomly the data came this way, is 1 in a little over 10,000. It's because it's less than that. So anyway,
wow,
we've had this data since 2011. Again, full stop, timeout, blow the whistle. We're all done. That's the end of that.
I'm just shocked by this.
Yeah.
That's a shocking chart.
Yep.
Oh, that makes me so angry too. I feel badly that I didn't know a lot of this, and I
didn't either.
I got very basic things for my kids. And thankfully, there weren't as many as there are now, but
mm-hmm.
my daughters were given these injections.
Yep. Me too.
It's awful.
So we're going to talk about this next, but first we're going to hear a very quick message from our number one sponsor. That's me. Hello, Dr. Chris Martenson here. Look, we've built a world on cheap oil, endless growth, and borrowed time. But the cracks are showing. Inflation's up, resources are thinning, and the old rules don't seem to apply anymore. I've tracked this for years, from the crash course to today, and I'm not here to sugarcoat it. At Peak Prosperity, I'm your information scout, hunting down the facts, cutting through the noise, and showing you how to adapt. This isn't just information, it's a lifeline. The game is changing fast. Are you ready? Subscribe to Peak Prosperity now, and let's get ahead of the curve. So thanks for listening to that. We have wonderful services for the subscribers at Peak Prosperity and an incredible crew. And by the way, Evie, I'm getting so excited because we're having our summit is coming up this September.
That's right.
And we're having it in New Hampshire again, and it just grows and grows every year. I mean, it sells out every year, but I mean, the interest in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fantastic. We're going to have Paul Kiker there, Dr. Ken Berry, myself.
Excellent.
I hope we get Jim Kunstler to come there. And
that would be good.
Anyway, it's amazing. It's amazing.
It's a good time. And the best thing about it, I think, Chris, is that the people that come to it get to know each other and get to know that they're not all alone in this world with all of this crap.
Yeah.
It's, I think, very encouraging and heartening, and it helps you feel more sane. But also you have friends for life. A lot of our tribe, these folks have been with us for 10, 15 years now. Right?
Yeah. So it's not just a subscription to a news service. We're a tribe.
It's a tribe.
Yeah, we're a community, and community is going to be very important. Evie, we got to talk about this now.
Yeah,
sorry,
I haven't heard about this.
This is going to be a little bit disturbing for folks.
A trigger warning.
So Kash Patel came out and tweeted this thing, and a lot of people under there, including myself, are kind of scratching their heads going, wait, where's our Epstein files? But leave that aside for a minute.
Okay.
He says, look, this is deeply disturbing, critically important to understand what's out there. Be aware there's these threats. It's really tragic. It's pretty bad stuff. He just wants everybody to know they're cracking down. He's referring to this ABC News article that finally came out about this. Of course, some people have been on this for years, talking about it. Since 2020 was the first time I found somebody talking about this, but now finally we're on it.
All right. So the case is that FBI officials say they are growing increasingly concerned about a loose network of violent predators who befriend teenagers through popular online platforms and then coerce them into escalating sexual and violent behavior.
Okay, look, we have a lot of pressures in our society, and some people are just sick and twisted, and that's always been true, and the internet sort of assists them in their efforts.
Right.
This goes way beyond that, and this isn't just to point out something dark that happens on the internet, right? This is because there's some really important messages in here for parents, and that's what we get to. And I was putting it together and trying to think it through, and then, of course, Evie, first thing that happens is, after I've done a lot of research, I open up and I read Jeff Childers' piece on it this morning. And if you aren't reading Jeff Childers' stuff, folks, you have to read it. This is Coffee and COVID. It's amazing, off of his Substack. And at any rate, let's carry on.
Deeply disturbing is an understatement. For whatever reason, the media isn't reporting the whole story. But the Trump administration has initiated one of the largest and most urgent federal law enforcement responses in history. The ABC article buried the lead, which was that the entire FBI is now involved in responding to an altogether new and horrifying threat. The task force is led by Assistant Director David Scott, blah, blah, blah. The FBI has more than 250 such investigations currently underway, with every single one of its 55 field offices across the country handling a 764 related case.
Boom. Boom.
Such a whole of FBI response is practically unprecedented. The closest thing I could find to compare to it was the FBI's response to the immediate aftermath of 9/11. So this could best be compared to an imminent national security emergency, but one nobody has ever heard of.
So let's, the reason I find this important, and I think this is worth elevating, besides the fact this is a PSA for parents,
sure,
right? A wake-up call, is that there's a larger thread here. So it's really been bothering me. Like, why aren't they arresting all these people who clearly have shovel-ready cases from the past, right?
Yeah.
Committed sedition, treason, enemies of the country, right? Whooping up fake, lawfare cases and throwing elections and doing all that stuff. Like, what, we're just going to move on and pretend that didn't happen?
Right.
Sorry, that's not going to work. And then, okay, so now they're throwing down on this, but what if this becomes the entree to saying, once you unpack this a little bit, you're going to find out this isn't just some angry little boys out there doing some stuff.
Right.
This is funded, and they're using state-of-the-art psychological techniques that I guarantee you, if you're honest, you can chase this back to an intelligence agency or a country.
Yes.
On some level.
Yes.
Maybe not all of it, but I'll bet you some of it, because it's just too dark, too well scripted, too thoughtful.
Yep. I wonder if you're right.
So accelerationism is the name for this. So in 2020, Jeff Childers, again, right here writing, he says, a new disease festered along the dark edges of the pandemic's digital petri dish. I love how he writes.
He's such a good writer. That's great.
It's not clear what to call it. An international movement? A dark new philosophy? A satanic religion? A twisted political ideology? A cult of chaos? All those are appropriate, but none is complete. Whatever it is, its defining characteristic is that it escapes easy definition. Academics and law enforcement types generally refer to the dogma as accelerationism. So this is a good term. We're going to have to learn this one. Accelerationism, because adherents' singular goal, mostly young men and some women, is to accelerate civilization's collapse, in particular Western civilization, through deliberately spreading literal evil and social chaos through kids.
Gross.
And this is from one of the website chat rooms they inhabit, how to accelerate the collapse of the West, right?
Look at that.
And what are some ways to accelerate this collapse? So, Evie, you and I have been talking about this for a while, and we're feeling around this
Mm-hmm.
It feels like the West is under attack, that there are malign forces that definitely want to attack the West, want to see it undermined, want to destroy it,
Yeah.
want to destroy the nuclear family, the sense of having a boundary, a border, a national identity, want to,
Mm-hmm.
in particular, you will get in trouble if you're a Christian. Jews and Muslims get a free pass so far, but Christians are under attack, which you will note because nobody's gotten arrested for being a Muslim or a Jew praying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. And that's definitely happening in the UK and I guess here in the US
So
as
it has
well.
a religious
It does
flavor
have a
on this whole
tone.
thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
Okay, so carrying on.
It already sounds like a bad, unbelievable joke or psyop, but it gets worse. A lot worse. As the pandemic spread, so did a really horrible idea. A new rabid flavor of accelerationism. One that combines anarchic terrorism with nihilism, neo-Nazism, and doing evil for the sake of evil.
There it is.
All inextricably intertwined with occult spirituality, including both figurative and literal Satan worship. Okay.
Ooh, we have been noticing this for quite a while and observing. So this is at multiple levels, though. So we see like the occult stuff that's been happening, right? And for whatever reason, they like doing this, right? It's at the big pageantry things that they put on for the Olympics.
Right.
It's when they're,
all these little hidden symbols,
little hidden
things.
symbols around the Black Eye Club, all that. Like, and we've just looked at it and said, whatever you make of it, at a minimum, they believe in it. And here it is, like coming through.
Yeah, it's bubbling up,
and
wow. Somehow, like-minded accelerationists groped their way toward each other in the shady corners of the dark web.
I love that. Groped their way towards each other somehow.
This is so good. And starting in COVID year 1, a loose network of groups began to coalesce around specific areas of morbid interest. These accelerationist affiliate groups vary slightly by each leaning into different aspects of the poisonous brew of spiritual, ideological, and political bad ideas. Their names include things like Adam Waffen Division, the Base, the Order of the Nine Angles, O9A, 764, the focus of ABC's article, which was blandly named after the Texas zip code where its 15-year-old founder started it up in 2020.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
A 15-year-old, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
But here's the thing. You can start stuff up and operate like this, and somehow nobody comes looking for you. Remember, they rounded up all of the J6 protesters.
That's right.
Cell phone records and interviews, and like they got on that right away.
They did.
Because those were people saying, hey, I was a little unhappy about the fact that this election was obviously stolen. And so I want to ensure that he accurately described the problem again from Jeff. Thank you, Jeff Shoulders. What he says is, what follows is as clinical a description as I can make it, because this stuff is really disturbing. So he trimmed it down for us so we don't have to parade. Like, it's really bad.
Is it?
It's really bad. So he clinically described it here.
Okay.
And here's the process.
All right. The 764 brand aims to destroy civil society through the corruption and exploitation of youth. The members spend their time online, posing as peers or allies in video games and on chat servers, especially in support forums for kids experiencing things like eating disorders or autism. Okay. They befriend the young people who are mostly, but not always, girls.
Okay. Now that tracks in with a lot of other things that we're seeing out there. I'm not saying everybody's a 764 victim, but what I am saying is that we've noticed that there's of the people who get really swept up in the transgenderism, which is to me an outgrowth of this. It's all sort of hatred of the feminine, hatred of the individual, hatred of family, hatred of culture, hatred of the West, hatred
of self,
of life, hatred of self, hatred of body. So it feels like an offshoot of that, and maybe because we have so much latitude for this crazy transgenderism stuff that's been going on, which some of it's legit, but some of it is just dudes looking for an angle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
exactly.
Anyway.
Once they've gained the child's trust and learned enough personal details, 764 members convince the child to do or say something mildly embarrassing on video. That is all it takes. The rest is nauseatingly inevitable. With that bit of compromise in hand, the apparently innocent relationship immediately becomes horrific. The groomer exposes himself as a terrifying member of the satanic group and orders the child to do something just a little more embarrassing under threat of sending the first video to the child's parents or their school. This creates an escalatory ladder with the child eventually performing the most horrific acts imaginable under the duress of exposure of all the previous violations. Oh my God, this happened to my niece.
You think so?
I think it might have.
Well, this is the sophistication of the escalatory ladder concept. I don't think that came out of a 15-year-old's head, right? At a minimum, they modeled it after what they saw with, say, the Epstein files or something else, right? So this is the same thing happens. It's like a doctor prescribes something to a child that maybe didn't do a whole lot of good for that child. And now you own them. The escalatory ladder. Next thing you know, they're collecting $40,000 bonuses for getting 68% of the people in their practice jabbed up, even though you have that huge table of awfulness that happens on the back end. You own them. This is called the moral erosion. Once you get somebody to commit a moral sin, an abomination, you own them. So you start small. Easy bite.
That's right. No, what I meant to say is my niece told me about this happening at our school. There's some stuff like this going on where what they did was they were able to infiltrate like kids' phones or whatever and had access somehow to their photos. And then they'd say, I'm going to release these embarrassing pictures to all your friends if you don't send me a nude or something like that. And the FBI was actually, at one point I heard that it was investigating this kind of behavior, but it must have been the same group.
It sounds exactly
a lot
like
it.
Right.
Which is terrifying.
Oh, indeed. So he says here, I realize some examples are necessary for you to understand the full scope of what's at play. Actual allegations from real cases include convincing girls to film themselves cutting words into their own skin. This is all, by the way, they have video of all this stuff.
Really?
Group or member handle names and satanic symbols, carving them in their skin. Murdering family pets. You convince them to do that. Abusing themselves. Producing CSAM, which is child sexual assault materials. Abusing their younger siblings, and worse. Like this has already happened. The 764 member wins. That's the Evie's face right now. Wins by being cruelly creative and finally convincing the child to self-erase. That's commit suicide, or even more horrific, becoming a hollow vessel for recruiting their own friends and other children as new victims in a satanic multi-level marketing scheme. In their dark chat room, 764 members compile and trade portfolios. That's their currency, a type of demonic currency evidencing their successful progression in the ruination of each child. These portfolios are edited with satanic overlays, music, grotesque filters designed to enhance trading and bragging rights. So think how, Evie, how disturbed and broken you have to be as a society where you don't produce like one monster. You produce a whole ecosystem of monsters. We're busy trading portfolios of ruination. Like how angry and disturbed you have to be, right?
I don't know what to make of that at all. Sounds a lot like the Epstein files.
To me.
Right? The 764 brand aims to destroy civil society through the corruption and exploitation
we already
of
read
youth.
this one. Sorry.
Oops.
My bad. My bad. Here we go.
Okay, this is the right one. The all of FBI response is not unjustified. 764 and similar dark networks are not just persisting, they're mutating, expanding, and spreading internationally. The FBI's own statements, open cases, and recent arrests all point to a disturbing conclusion. The groups are adapting and growing faster than law enforcement can dismantle them. DOJ confirms 764 now has ties in New Zealand, Australia, the UK, and Eastern Europe, or Ukraine.
That's Ukraine.
Some groups are reportedly building tools to automate grooming and sorting victims.
The dark side of AI.
We're no longer dealing with a group or even a collection of groups. We're dealing with a satanic template, a how-to script for orchestrated digital depravity. It's metastasizing into open source terrorism with a low barrier to entry. It is decentralized and scalable, and now with AI deepfakes, better encryption, and worsening youth mental health, every day it gets easier for them to destroy lives at scale.
So the question becomes, why? Like we've hit this point in the story where despair is so overwhelming that this actually is where dopamine comes from. This feels like fun, right? There's a level of hatred of self and humanity. This feels like I can't explain this through normal progression of humans. Like we live at the easiest times possible.
I know.
Right? It can't be that these are people who just suffered depraved childhoods of starvation and endless cold with lice.
Well, could I throw something out there as a potential reason for this happening at this point? I mean, I think, as you said before in previous episodes too, humanity kind of goes through cycles, and we are coming up on a cycle where we've, like you said, we've had a lot of easy times.
Yeah.
People are disconnected from reality, blah, blah, blah. But also because of like video games as well, right? There's this disconnect, deep disconnect when you see somebody on a screen, right? If you're practicing mutilating people in a video game for 10 or 15 years, what's watching somebody undress on the other side of a screen? You know what I mean? It has this like
the objectification, the dehumanization, the desensitization.
That's right.
All
it's
that.
not real.
Yeah.
And I think that might be contributing to it in some way. I mean, I don't know. I'm curious what other people are going to say about it.
Well, who knows? It feels like it has a deep statey kind of a fingerprint to me.
Isn't it potentially recruiting assassins, people trapped in a situation with no escape? Rockstar 2001 says. And
I think Dan, hey Dan, is speaking for a lot of folks here.
I'm so sad that I didn't know to pay more attention to my own children, what my own children did online starting around 8 or 9.
Yeah.
Yep. That's right.
Yep.
And they have technologies now even earlier and earlier. I mean, this could happen to younger and younger kids.
Yeah.
Yikes.
All right. So this gets down to the advice for parents and Jeff Childers. Again, this is all from Jeff Childers. 100%. All credit goes there. He does such a great job framing this. But I love how he brought it home here. And he said the traditional talk to your kids advice, wholly inadequate in the face of this Lovecraftian threat. It's the PR equivalent of thoughts and prayers, vague, late, and wholly insufficient for what we're facing. Children are up against weaponized psychological warfare. Weaponized psychological warfare. And so I see it in a continuation pattern because that's what the COVID jab hysteria was about. It was weaponized psychological warfare.
Yeah.
We've been running schemes and scams and grifts and propaganda on our own citizens for a really long time. It breaks people.
It does.
You can't be in a psychological torture chamber forever without breaking. I think what we're seeing in 764 are people who broke.
Yeah.
Now we ought to be asking, why are we breaking our own people?
Why are we doing that?
Why are we doing that?
Who is trying to break our people?
Who? I think we have to have
what it is too.
We have to have that talk. So and he says here as well, scripted grooming, organized international blackmail networks, and occult cults masquerading as friends. This is an important part. Parents need more than a talk. They need a protocol. Parents of young children and older male children must assume the threat is a clear and present danger. 100%. It's not a matter of if, but maybe has happened at your niece's school, but when children will be targeted. Parents must presume that these predators already know what platforms their child uses, what they struggle with emotionally, how best to manipulate them. Direct messaging should be absolutely disabled. We cannot even trust friends because they may have been compromised. App installs should be allowed with parental permission only. Logging and monitoring tools have become a requirement in today's world. And for heaven's sake, keep devices out of bedrooms at night when kids can use them unsupervised.
Indeed. Kids should be taught to recognize cult indoctrination language. Things like, you're so mature for your age, or your parents don't get you. I know something no one else knows, or let's just keep this between us.
Do you remember very quickly? So back when it was like more of a thing, but there were these grotesque gentlemen who eye makeup and all that stuff. There was this thin-faced guy, I forget his name, but I watched a couple of his blogs where he was speaking directly to children, and he said those things directly.
That creepy guy trying to, I don't know his name either.
It looked like he was trying to put on makeup badly to look like a clown, but but he was still like, I love you, your parent, more than even your parents.
Yeah.
Remember that?
I do remember that. We'll have to go dig him out.
That's what this stuff was. This exactly 100% what this was. And we were supposed to pretend this was okay. This was normal. You'd be shouted down if you said, ew, gross. What is that?
Right.
Well, that's what this was.
You're
it fit into this.
Transphobic if you shouted down. Yeah.
Anyhow, just thought I'd break. He said all those things.
He did. Any pressure to join a chat, send a photo, or keep secrets, parents must teach their children to refrain. If someone online ever pressures you to do anything, even if you think you'll get in trouble, I will protect you first and not punish you.
And you got to not punish them.
No.
Just full on protect.
That's right.
Bring out the mama bear, the papa bear, and just ring fence this off.
Most burdensome of all, parents must learn to use the most common platforms: Discord, Telegram, TikTok, Roblox, Minecraft, Twitch, and Reddit. Parents of at-risk children with existing anxiety disorders should strongly consider creating device-free lifestyles. Just take those kids off the board. So
Yeah, take them off the board.
that's such a good point, though, that you have to really understand how to navigate those programs yourself.
Yeah.
In order to really know what your kid is
It's a
up
tall
to.
ask, right? Or you just say, sorry, kids, you're not going to get any of those things.
That's right.
Right?
Finally, and much less importantly, I devoted a day's blog to this subject because we need to recognize what horrors Trump's new law enforcement officials are actually dealing with. Conservatives too often focus on what they aren't doing. Where are the arrests? Where are the Epstein files that we might miss an emerging bigger picture?
Okay, well, I'm only going to say, I'm going to give some grace and latitude that, okay, they're going to back off on the Epstein files, although some more files should get released. Nothing new.
No.
The Clintons are in there. Alan Dershowitz, usual names, right? We already have the names. Where are the arrests? But what if Evie, they're dealing with something where they're like, there's a larger organized pattern of darkness that's coming from somewhere. And if we find out it's a state or a corporation or a certain billionaire group, I would say immediate, swift, and severe justice, cut off everything we possibly can, destroy whoever it is that's doing this, because this is evil. We have no place for that. You're coming after destroy our children, destroy the fabric of our culture, destroy the country. If you are doing those things, we ought to be every bit as severe as, like, remember, they're all like, oh, we're going to harm the Houthis who are just like shooting at ships off of their own coast. If that's intolerable to us, this should be 10 times more intolerable.
It's true.
It ought to be really bad.
This is right at home.
So all of this fits for me into, and we're just going to finish up with this, and then we'll cut over to the peak prosperity side part of this. But Evie, I just wanted to go over this part because this is fascinating.
Okay.
So this guy does a lot of really, really great work. The New Emerging King, he does great stuff with working with youths and all this stuff. And he ran an interesting experiment, and I wanted to hear his experiment because I think it fits into this larger sweep of this mental illness we're talking about. It's not organic. We are being targeted. This is weaponized psychological operations, and it's had its impact. And here he's talking about it.
I made 2 separate videos before the election. One of the videos said I was going to vote for Kamala Harris. The other video said I was going to vote for Donald Trump. And I just wanted to see the mixed reactions from people and how people would react, because I do a lot of work from my hometown, do a lot of work from my community. I work with young boys. And I never said who I was voting for. But I made those 2 videos because I want to show people how they are in reality. I made the Donald Trump video and I made the Kamala Harris video. Under the Kamala Harris video, you definitely had some Trump supporters like, well, we understand that you may have a different opinion or whatever, but we still support what you do. Maybe you'll wake up one day, et cetera, things like that. It wasn't nothing vile, wasn't no bad comments or nothing. I made the Donald Trump video. I got people that unfollowed me. I got people saying they can't support nothing I do no more. I got folk calling me all types of names, et cetera. But what's crazy is all of the Kamala Harris supporters have become what they accuse Trump supporters of being. When you say you support Donald Trump, y'all be ready to kill him. Y'all ready to burn them at the stake. You calling them all types of names. You unfollowing them. You don't care what they're doing for their community. Nothing. If you support Trump, I hate you so much, et cetera. But all the people under the post, all the Trump supporters, when I said I was going to vote for Kamala, it was all love anyway. They was like, well, we still support what you're doing. We still going to donate. We still love the work, even though you don't have to support Donald Trump, et cetera. So I've only received hate from the people that call themselves the tolerant side, the side that's supposed to be about love, the side that's not about hate. But it's crazy because anytime somebody doesn't agree with you, all you spew is hate. All you give is hate. So it's funny how everybody who call themselves Democrats, you have turned into what you accuse the Republicans of being.
There, boom.
Mic drop. Boom.
Boom. Right. So, I just think that that captures it right there. And I'm going to suggest this isn't organic. This is too fast, too sudden. You and I both know families, friends, individuals, colleagues who are struggling with this immediate sort of separation, the divorce that's happened, sometimes physical, literal divorce, because
that's right.
The mindsets can't occupy the same territory anymore. It's really become very stark. But I think that illustrated one key difference. I've noticed this when we do go to conservative gatherings, they are very welcoming. And when we go to so-called progressive gatherings, like as soon as they smell that you're not one of them, 100%, it's like this turn. It's really
spicy.
they turn on you.
It gets a little scary. I
dark.
felt that when we went to that Tesla protest takedown thing. I could feel that they were, sensing that you and I were coming from a different place, and I could feel their animosity.
Yep. Well, we ran out of time out here on the public side, so we're not going to have a chance to talk about this, but
oh shoot,
I'll save it for next time. This is coming up on Friday, so come to if you're out here on the public side, come to Friday's Signal Hour at 1:00, and we're going to talk about this because Canada has a big problem. This was important, but that other stuff was even more important and took precedence, and I wanted to make sure we talked about it. So with that, thank you everybody for being here out here with us on the Signal Hour. We'll see you next Friday at 1:00 if you want to come back for that. It'll be just like this. And remember, take care of your kids, protect them. It's an evil world out there right now with evil people, and they've got wicked, powerful tools to spread their hate, their division, their satanic stuff, and all of that.
And if you go outside and plant a garden, which is the perfect time to be doing that, you don't even have to worry about all the crap going on online. Just get yourself outside and get your hands in the dirt and get your kids working out there with you. And you don't even have to worry about that stuff.
Yep.
But thanks for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you here.
All right. And so now we're cutting over to Peak Prosperity side. So let me see where I got to go with this, Evie.
All right.
Because that's the Canada stuff. I'm saving that for next time. All right. Here's where we're starting over